There was one rule, not a list, one rule, and my foreman made it clear before he'd even let us near the elevator. No talking, no joking, and no matter what we heard down there, we did not whistle. I didn't take it seriously. I'd heard rules like it before. 4 of us went down that elevator that night. 3 of us came back up. And the man who saved my life down there, the one who followed that rule like his life depended on it, has no employment record, no badge number, no last paycheck. According to my own company, he was never there at all. Let me start from the beginning. My name's Tyler, 6 years as a maintenance tech for the city transit system. Light bulbs, wiring, the occasional flooded relay room. Not glamorous. Steady paycheck though, and after a while, you stop noticing how strange it is to spend half your life somewhere the sun never reaches. My regular partner was a man named Miller, older than me by a decade, hair gone mostly gray, skin with that permanent gray cast everyone gets after enough years underground. Miller didn't talk much. He didn't ask questions either, and I used to think that made him a coward. I know better now. I think it made him the only person in that crew who understood exactly what kind of questions were dangerous to ask. The day they posted us to the black line, the break room went quiet in a way I'd never seen before. It wasn't an official name. Nobody wrote Black Line on a work order. It was just what the older techs called it, always a little quieter than the rest of the conversation. A stretch of tunnel built in the 1920s, sealed after a collapse, nobody fully explained, stripped off the current maps and logged internally as decommissioned. Officially, there was nothing down there. Unofficially, guys talked about flickering lights on the old security cameras, about sounds on the radio that didn't match anything above ground, about 2 techs a decade back who went in for a routine inspection and came out reassigned to a different borough within the week, refusing to say why. Our foreman called the 4 of us into his office. Me, Miller, and 2 younger techs, Jackson, who treated every job like a dare, and Lee, who was nervous about most things and honest about it, which I respected. The foreman didn't give us a safety briefing. He gave us one sentence. Down there, you don't talk unless you have to. You don't joke around, and you do not, for any reason, whistle. I smirked. Jackson outright laughed. Miller just nodded, slow, like a man agreeing to something he'd already made peace with a long time ago. We took the freight elevator down at the start of our shift. It groaned the whole way, metal shrieking against metal, like something underneath us didn't want the cage to reach the bottom. Jackson filled the silence the way he always did, joked about getting cell signal down there, joked about subway goblins. Miller stood against the back wall, chewing an unlit cigarette, watching the doors like they might open on something he needed to be ready for. I asked him if he was always this quiet. Silence is part of the job down here, he said. Jackson grinned at that, said if something called his name in the dark, he guessed he shouldn't answer. Miller's expression didn't change, but his voice did. Pray nothing does. The door alone should have told us something. 4 deadbolts, None of them recently oiled, like whoever installed them wanted it to stay shut more than they wanted it to be easy to open again. Jackson slapped his palm against the iron, said it was a classic horror movie setup. Lee said something about the monster jumping out right on cue and even managed to laugh. We got the door open. Inside, there was nothing. I don't mean quiet. I've worked plenty of quiet tunnels. I mean nothing. No drip, no draft, no hum of distant machinery. The kind of silence that feels less like an absence of sound and more like sound had been deliberately taken out of that space and never put back. Jackson stood at the threshold, looked into the dark, and whistled. Sharp, deliberate, just to prove the rule was nonsense. The sound went out into that tunnel and kept going, longer than it should have, before it finally died. "See? Empty parking lot," Jackson said. Miller had him by the collar and against the wall before I even registered him moving. Do not whistle. Jackson shoved him off, furious, asking who exactly was supposed to hear us down there. Miller didn't answer. He just turned and started walking into the tunnel, and for the first time since I'd met him, I saw something on his face that wasn't caution. It was closer to grief. The first couple of hours were routine, flashlight beams cutting through drifting dust, checking conduit, logging what needed replacing. I'd almost convinced myself the whole rule really had been superstition. Then Jackson dropped his wrench. He stood up straight, went very still, and said someone was calling his name from further down the line. Lee tried to joke it off, said it was probably a collection agency. Jackson didn't laugh. His face had gone the color of the concrete around us. Miller's voice cut through the dark before either of us could ask anything. "Keep working. Don't look up. Ignore it." Nobody asked how Miller already knew what to do about a voice none of the rest of us could place. At the time, I told myself he just had more experience down there than we did. I don't believe that anymore either. By the time our break came around, none of us were talking much. Even Jackson had gone quiet, which should have told me how rattled he actually was. He pulled a pair of foam earplugs out of his jacket, said his head was pounding and he just wanted 10 minutes of actual silence. Miller snatched them out of his hand before he could get them in. Jackson snapped at him, said Miller didn't own his ears, said he had every right to a little quiet. Miller stepped in close, and when he spoke, it wasn't loud. It was worse than loud. "It's dangerous to be deaf down here. Sound gets into this place. It doesn't get to leave. If they realize you can't hear them, they come closer." Nobody said anything for a while after that. Then, from inside the concrete wall, we were leaning against a tap. Then another, closer, harder, like something striking the wall with a solid, curved edge, like bone against stone. A voice followed it, human-shaped, but wrong mangled, like someone trying to form words with a mouthful of dirt. "We're here." Lee backed toward the far wall, asking if it could be radio interference, an echo, anything with a normal explanation. Jackson wasn't listening anymore. He walked straight to the wall and pressed his ear against it. I watched his face come apart in real time. "They know us," he said. I asked him what they were saying. He didn't answer me directly. He said it was his mother's voice. Said she was calling his name. Said she told him it was cold in there. His mother had been dead for 11 years. Miller grabbed him by the jacket and threw him to the ground, not gently, not out of anger, but the way you'd tackle someone away from a live wire. "They don't want you," he said. "They want your answer. You already gave it to them. That was when the wall stopped producing one voice and started producing dozens. Whispering, overlapping, wet laughter threading through all of it, fingernails dragging against concrete from every direction at once. It didn't feel like it was coming from one place anymore. It felt like the tunnel itself had started breathing. And then, all at once, like a blade cutting a thread, silence. Our flashlights started to flicker, and from the deepest point of the tunnel, a sound came back toward us. A whistle, the exact one Jackson had let out hours earlier at the threshold, repeated back to us, slow, deliberate, like whoever, whatever was doing it, wanted us to recognize our own mistake. Jackson was crying by then, still telling himself it was a prank he no longer believed in. He got to his feet. His eyes had gone empty, fixed on something past us in the dark. "She's alone down there," he said. "I can't leave her." He walked into the tunnel. His flashlight beam bounced against the walls for a few seconds and then went out. A moment later, a wet, tearing sound rolled out of the dark. The sound of something being taken apart, fast, and with no interest in doing it quietly. Jackson never screamed. Just one short breath, and then bone. Lee broke first, dropped to his knees, hands over his mouth, and then the fear won, and he screamed Jackson's name into the dark. I understand why he did it. I don't think I can blame a person for that. But it was the worst possible thing he could have done. Before the sound of his own voice had even finished echoing, the tunnel screamed it back at him. Not once, dozens of times, from every direction, in a pitch that mimicked Lee's voice, and then twisted it into something closer to a mockery of grief than an actual echo. Something black and thick began dripping from the tunnel ceiling. Our flashlights died, all of them, all at once, until the only light left was the small backup beam in my pocket. I swung it toward the ground where Lee had been kneeling. He was gone. No blood, no struggle, just his flashlight, still spinning in a slow circle on the tracks. Miller's hand closed on my arm like a vice. "We run. Whatever you hear, don't look back, don't breathe loud, run." We didn't hear footsteps behind us. What we heard was worse, the dry scrape of something sliding along the walls and across the ceiling, keeping pace directly above us without ever needing to hurry. We hit the iron door at a dead sprint. Miller shoved me through first, and then, instead of following, he stayed on the other side, both hands on the door, starting to pull it shut from within. I screamed at him to come through. He looked at me through the narrowing gap, and for the first time all night, there was no fear on his face at all. "I've been part of this place a long time, Tyler," he said, and then he smiled. It wasn't his smile. It stretched too wide, too even, a shape a human face isn't built to make. Behind him, out of the dark, I saw more faces surface, pale, hollow-eyed, every single one of them wearing that exact same grin. The door slammed shut. The deadbolt dropped into place on the other side with a sound like a verdict. I ran for the elevator alone. All the way up that shaft, whistling followed me. It didn't stay a whistle for long. It started shifting, note by note, into something with a shape I recognized. My own voice, calling my own name back down into the dark. "Tyler, come back down." The official incident report calls it a tunnel collapse. Jackson and Lee are still listed as missing. Search teams spent weeks down there and recovered nothing. As for Miller, when I asked HR to pull his file so I could at least send something to his family, They told me there was no record of anyone by that name ever working for the transit authority. My supervisor looked at the paperwork, then looked at me, and told me only 3 men had gone down that elevator that night, not 4. I quit that same day. Didn't stay long enough to collect my last check. I live somewhere else now, high floor, solid concrete under my feet instead of dirt. Every light in the apartment left on through the night. I keep a television or a radio running at all times, because true silence does something to me I can't fully explain to people who weren't there. When it goes quiet enough, I start hearing that tunnel again. I haven't ridden a subway since. I don't go underground for anything. If I catch even a trace of wet concrete or rusted metal on the street, my chest goes tight before my brain has caught up to why. Nothing supernatural happens to me up here. I want to be honest about that. But every time I close my eyes, I see the same 3 things in the same order. Jackson walking into the dark toward a voice that wasn't his mother's. Lee's screams swallowed and thrown back at him in dozens of borrowed voices. And Miller's face, right before the door shut, wearing a smile that had never belonged to him at all. I keep asking myself the same question most nights. If he wasn't Miller, if he was never really one of us, then what was he actually doing all those years, keeping people like me alive?